What is it you look for when purchasing a home? Is it a good location, price? What if you bought a home and found out later the roof was put on by a non-licensed contractor or a murder took place inside the home? For a look at details that must be disclosed by a seller, I'm joined by Tanya Hertz with San Diego State's College of Business Administration. She's also a licensed real estate broker. Tanya, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
Why is disclosure so important, both for the buyer and the seller?
So that's interesting that you say that. It is important for both parties. For the seller, it protects them if in the event that something might come up later. So, for example, the roof example that you said, if the seller were to not to explain to the buyer that the roof was installed by an unlicensed person, they could potentially be sued later down the road. And for the buyer, of course, it is extremely important because they're going into the transaction with their eyes wide open. They know what they're getting into. And there are many, many disclosures that we look at here in California that are required and important parts of the process.
Well, let's talk about those things. What are some of the things that sellers must disclose in California?
So there are a lot of things that sellers need to disclose in California. So anything that anything that might be material to the purchase, anything that might affect the value or the desirability of the property need to be disclosed. And there are some interesting things that need to be disclosed. If there was a death on the property, for example, in the last 3 years, that needs to be disclosed. If there's been any repairs to the property, that needs to be disclosed. Something as simple as if somebody smoked at the property, whether or not that was indoors or outdoors, we need to let the buyers know so they can make an informed decision before purchasing.
So what if you have a bad neighbor, an unruly neighbor? Does disclosure go past the property line?
That's an interesting question. And some of the disclosures here in California have been expanded beyond the property itself to encompass the neighborhood. And let's say an unruly, as you said, an unruly neighbor. That's something that you need to disclose, a barking dog. So even if it's not on the property, if it's something that can affect the buyer's enjoyment of the property, it's something we need to let them know about.
But so, what if there's been a heinous crime committed in the neighborhood, in the community? Does a buyer need to know about that?
Absolutely, absolutely. You can think about, many of us remember the Heaven's Gate cult. This was years ago, the suicides of, I think, 39 people out in Rancho Santa Fe. That's something that stays with the property much longer than 3 years. So that goes beyond the 3-year disclosure period. As long as it stays in the public perception, that's something that we need to let the buyers know. So anything that the seller knows, anything that the seller is aware of at the time of the sale, they need to let the buyer know to protect themselves and to protect the buyers.
What if the seller believes his property or her property is haunted? What then?
Okay, that's
a lot of people
absolutely.
who think that their homes are haunted.
Absolutely, that's a very interesting question. It actually comes up more often than you would think, and we actually do have to disclose that. So while I might not believe in ghosts, and many sellers don't believe in ghosts, there are buyers that do. So it doesn't matter whether or not it's material to the seller. If it might be material to the buyer, we need to let them know. And it may affect the purchase price of the home. Some people might even enjoy a haunted house, the macabre. Yeah, it might even be a selling feature, who knows?
But what are the consequences if you don't reveal that your house is haunted or you believe that your house is haunted?
Sure. So if it's something that we can prove that the seller knew prior to selling the house or at the time of the sale of the house, the buyers could potentially go after them in court. So there are some real consequences, monetary consequences, for not disclosing what you know about a house.
Now, I understand that there's a new code on the books dealing with the drought. Tell me about that.
So starting on January 1st of 2014, anytime a seller makes an alteration to a property, to either the bathroom or the kitchen, they need to put in low flow water fixtures. So, and this is any repair to a bathroom or a kitchen, whether or not they were intending to even look at the fixtures. And this is more than just a disclosure, because not only do they have to disclose whether or not the property has water fixtures, low flow water fixtures as in the past, they now actually have to correct this, which is different from a lot of the other disclosures.
Tanya Hertz, thank you so much for coming on the program.
Thank you so much for having me.